The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Professionally Develop Yourself, offered by the Oregon State University Alumni Association in partnership with Oregon State's Workspace unit. I'm Greg Aronoff, the Marketing and Communications here with Workspace, and I'm joined by Yulia Dennis from the Alumni Association. We also have Mark, Pam, and Benny. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. So before we get started, I'm going to share our agenda for the day. I work for Workspace, which is the non-credit arm of the university. We partner with colleges across campus to offer open enrollment classes to the public on subjects ranging from workforce training to wood science. We're always excited to continue our partnership with Yulia Dennis from the Alumni Association. And I'm sure some of you have joined us for some of our other webinars on the career series. So we're excited to have Yulia, Mark, Pam, and Benny here today to talk about professional development. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is a great topic. That's a good one for the beginning of the year, and I'm excited for all of you to join us, and thank you for attending. And thank you, Greg, for helping us. I always enjoy partnering with OSU Workspace on these webinars. This webinar is a new thing for us because we're performing the webinar entirely remotely. So the rest of us, or all of us, are all calling in. Usually Greg and I are in the same room, but this time he has a child sick at home, and so we're going to be doing our best to keep the technology piece going smoothly. And so I appreciate everyone's patience as we try, like I said, doing this entirely remotely. So to introduce myself, my name is Yulia Dennis, and I'm the Director for Alumni Career Services at the OSU Alumni Association. I've been in my role for about 3 years now and absolutely love what I do. If you have any career goals or questions and would like some assistance, I'm always happy to help. I'm really passionate about professional development and personal development. And my motto is to engage in what matters and to help others to engage in what matters to them. So if this is something that you're working through and you have a professional goal you're trying to achieve, I'm happy to meet with you or talk with you. And so we're going to be going through, we'll be sharing a bunch of different knowledge throughout the webinar. And so do feel free to ask questions in the chat box. We're going to be addressing questions throughout, and then there's going to be a link sent to with the presentation afterwards. I'm going to share a little bit about our OSU Alumni Career Programs. So we offer programs for all alumni, ranging from one-on-one work, resume reviews. We have webinars like this one. We have in-person events. We have an alumni career ambassador program as well that I run. So we have a whole suite of programs that you can take advantage of. And like I said, if you reach out to me, then I'd be glad to share more with you. So to provide an overview of the webinar, we're going to be looking at professional development planning, understanding the importance of networking, ways that you can describe yourself professionally, how to expand career opportunities, and really digging into how do you have the kind of skills and experiences that have the highest return investment for your career. And before we start too, I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to our OSU Portland Business Roundtable. So the 3 presenters are all members of this group. It's a wonderful program for our alumni in the Portland area. And if you're in Portland, I definitely recommend that you consider joining some of their events. So we'll first have Mark introduce himself and share a little bit about his background. And thank you to all the presenters for presenting today.
Thank you, Yulia. Again, my name is Mark Conan. I graduated from Oregon State in 1983 with a business degree and an accounting concentration. I went to work for Pricewaterhouse in public accounting for a little over 10 years. Went from there to a client called Crown Pacific. That we were a publicly traded partnership, did a lot of acquisitions, financing, resold, that kind of thing. From there, I went to a high-tech startup, kind of a start over that I worked at about 3.5 years. It's one of the startups that didn't make it. And from there, I did some contracting and was able to find a position through networking at Plaid Pantries as the chief financial officer there. I worked there for almost 13 years and was able to retire from there in 2016. I call it semi-retired, actually. I do a lot of volunteering, including OSU Business Roundtable. Was the chair of that for a few years and still enjoy attending that. Also do some faith-based outdoor adventure. And then I also do contract CFO or fractional CFO work. So part-time work for companies that are too small to have a full-time CFO.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mark, for your introduction, and I'm really glad to have you here. Next, we're going to have Pam introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pam Knowles. I am also an Oregon State University graduate in history and education. Following graduation, I was an educator for a period of time and then went back to law school, and for 40 years practiced law in the business arena mostly. I practiced as a partner at Davis Wright Tremaine for many years, and then went on to work for the state with a commission on judicial discipline, prosecuting judges for misconduct, and then went on to work for the Portland Business Alliance as their general counsel. A few years ago, I shifted gears and came back to Oregon State to be the executive director for industry relations and built a career success center within the College of Business and had a great time being on campus again. And then now I am semi-retired like Mark, also working in a lot of volunteer opportunities, mostly around women's leadership, and then spent 8 years on the board of directors for Portland Public Schools, most of that time as the chairperson. But I'm very excited to be here today, and I look forward to talking to all of you about professional development, because that's what really made the difference for me in my career, and I think it's one of the most important things that you can learn about. So look forward to this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pam. I'm definitely excited to have you here. Next, we have Benny, who's also one of our alumni career ambassadors, and so I'm going to have him introduce himself next.
Great. Thank you, Yulia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. So a little different to my approach to getting to OSU. I earned my music degree from Willamette University, a liberal arts school in Oregon, if you're not familiar. And I wanted to be a music educator. And throughout my time, really learned that business was my passion. So I went back a couple years later and earned my MBA from OSU. And throughout that time, I really learned that the computer industry was really where I wanted to be. So that's where I am currently working in product marketing for CDSG in the computer hardware industry. And I'm also a career coach, and I love to coach and mentor, which is kind of why I wanted to be an educator. So I've been career coaching for about a year now. And one reason that came about was, during my MBA time, you could really find me at the Career Center almost every week at OSU. So that is a passion of mine. And so I'm really excited and jazzed to be a part of this panel and look forward to providing more insights.
Wonderful. Thank you, Benny. And thank you, Mark, Pam, and Benny for being here today. This is a really knowledgeable group of people, and we had a lot of fun preparing for this webinar, so I'm excited for them to share their knowledge with you. Next, we're going to have Pam start us off with starting where you're at.
Great, thank you. I think whenever we talk about professional development, one of the most important things is to stop and think about where you currently are in your career and in your professional development efforts. So an assessment, I think one of the easy ways an assessment is to think about it like a SWOT analysis. Determine your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and threats to you in your career. For example, around strengths, think about what are your current responsibilities in the job that you have now. What areas of special knowledge or expertise do you have? What do your current contacts look like, and are they the people who can help you further your career? How are your current networking skills? Do they need improvement? Are you looking for new ideas about how to network? What are the recent professional development opportunities that you've taken advantage of? Maybe there's seminars or that kind of thing. Do you have a mentor? And then what might be your other interests that might be connected to what you're looking, how you're looking to develop in your career? Weaknesses could be just stopping and thinking about where could you improve. Other kinds of limitations, are you interested in a new job? And if so, are you geographically limited? Are you staying do you need to stay where you are? For opportunities, I think one of the interesting places to look is with your current employer. And of course, professional development, if you're talking to your employer about professional development, generally, employers are enthusiastic about employees who want to improve themselves and develop. So I think starting with your current employer is always a good place. And then starting with your current network, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about later on. And then threats, the one that pops into my head is one that happened not too many years ago, is of course a recession in the economy or downturns or those kinds of things that might happen that would slow your career development. There are other things that may happen in your personal life or other areas that would cause you to have threats, and so think about those. So in conclusion on this, I think doing the SWOT analysis is one of the first steps that you should be taking, determining what your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats are, and that will allow you to move forward in planning how you're going to develop yourself.
Thank you, Pam. That's really great advice. And I think the only other thing I would add to that on top of the SWOT analysis is looking at evaluating things from the perspective of value. So what matters most to you? And then how do you, how is that showing up in your life currently? And how do you make that happen as well? We did have some, actually a lot of questions pop up. And one question that came up, and Pam, I wanted to ask you this before we move on, is someone said, I've just transferred programs with a new position and more responsibilities. A lot of the people are new to me, but there are some in the office who I'm familiar with. How can I leverage this transitional period of starting a new position to enhance my reputation and develop as an expert in my field? So could you speak about that, Pam?
Sure, I can add a few things to that. I think anytime you're changing positions, it allows you an opportunity to think about where you are and who you're working with. It's a huge learning opportunity, not only for you, but also for the people that you're working with. Getting to know the people that you work with. I'm not sure how large the organization is, but those that are direct reports or that are colleagues, finding a time to have coffee, have lunch, be at the water cooler, connect via email, be present around the people that you're working with so that they can see you and understand you personally, as well as a boss or as a colleague. I think are all those interpersonal things that are so important when you're first establishing yourself in a new position. And then of course there's always understanding all the technical parts of your job and figuring out who amongst your colleagues or employees can help you with some of the technical things as well as the personal part.
That's great. Thank you, Pam. That's really good advice. Next we'll have Pam share about goal setting.
Thanks again. So once you have your SWOT analysis and you know your strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, then I think the next step is to set up a plan for how you want to go about improving yourself in your professional life. And that starts, I think, with establishing a professional development plan. Those plans would have pretty broad goals. And I wouldn't have more than five goals. I think that's a reasonable amount to try and reach. And of course, as you feel like you reach a goal, then there's always the opportunity to add more. And under those goals, I think you want to figure out what are the steps that you need to take in order to reach each goal, and include timelines for yourself so that you can hold yourself accountable. I know that I like timelines because I tend to procrastinate, so it's always nice to have a date there when I'm forcing myself to do what has to be done according to the plan that I have. So some of the broader goals that I've seen in professional development plans might be things like get more training. So, you're checking in with your employer, you're looking at outside opportunities for training. If you're in a large city or the Portland market, there are all kinds of opportunities that pop up for professional development and for improving yourself. Next, of course, in the plan would be, for me, meeting some new people. And that allows you to extend your network and perhaps find people who could help you in your career, or if you're thinking about moving and you're networking. So different ways to meet new people, of course, attending events in the business world. We all attend events that have to do with either our business or with something else that we're just interested in doing. Joining a board of some kind, the Business Journal in Portland, or the Business Alliance, or the Chamber, almost anywhere. All those kinds of organizations have events that help you meet new people. Another thing that you might want to do is develop some kind of an expertise if you don't have one right now, or if you want a new kind of expertise, either in your field or in a field that you're interested in the future. And then I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but also getting social. And by that, I mean, get on LinkedIn, find out a way to write it or think about different topics in your area of expertise that you could write an article about and maybe post them. Or if you see an interesting article that is related to your field, it's okay to go ahead and post that with your comments about it. And I think just improving communications generally is another potential goal, and that would include things like, sending notes or emails or things to friends, people in your network, colleagues, about different types of professional activities that you're involved in that they might also be interested in.
Thank you, Pam. That's some really great advice. And I want to add too that if you need help with goal setting, then you can also contact me about that. This is an area I'm very passionate about as well. So then Pam's going to share more about professional growth and how to do more of that.
So some of these things are pretty, that we're talking about are pretty similar. And professional growth, of course, is one that I kind of mentioned in our goal setting, because professional growth, I think, is always a goal that we should all have in our plans. So different ways to get involved in professional organizations. For example, those who are in accounting, there are state and local CPA organizations. There are marketing organizations, the American Marketing Association. Of course, for people like me, there's the Bar Association. And there are all kinds of professional organizations that you can reach out to and become involved in as a member, or eventually as a leader in those organizations. All of those things help you network and help people understand that you are a person who's truly interested in improving yourself professionally. Another thing is to read professional journals or articles. Keeping up on current events in your own organization or in your own area of expertise is very important, so that if you have an opportunity to either talk to people about it or write an article, you have the ability to do that. For younger people, I think it's really important to look for those young leader organizations that are in every city. There's a Leadership Portland. I know there's a Leadership Corvallis, the Leadership, pick your city. There are always those kinds of organizations in every city. Different centers or organizations that look at particular areas. For example, in Portland, I'm involved in the Center for Women's Leadership, which works with young people, or the American Leadership Forum, or the Organization of Minority Entrepreneurs. Or there's just a lot of different organizations that you can usually get the names of those organizations from your local chamber or business organization, and they can help you find places where you might be able to plug in. And then, of course, again, LinkedIn, I think, is going to come up lots and lots in our discussion today, because it's such a great tool to use in networking or building your career and being involved in professional development. So, look at LinkedIn, follow it a little bit. I mean, don't stay on LinkedIn all the time, because you're not going to have, professional development is not going to be successful if you're always on LinkedIn. But but look at things that might be connected to you, make comments, congratulate people. There's an opportunity to do that if somebody's moved, has a new job, has been in their job for a certain period of time. Reconnect with folks. I personally had the opportunity to reconnect with somebody that I hadn't seen for 20 years, which was really wonderful. And we had a chance to get together and find out what we're currently doing and how we might be able to work with each other in the future. And then, of course, LinkedIn helps you build your network. So be sure to take the time to spend a little bit of time, I think, each day on LinkedIn.
Well, I definitely can second that advice. I think LinkedIn is an amazing tool, and we do have some webinars on LinkedIn in our webinar library, so do check those out if you're unsure of how to use LinkedIn. We're going to have Greg introduce our next, our first actually poll question of the webinar.
Yes, so in the question box, this will be fill in the blank. What do you think is the most important part of a professional development plan? So if you want to put your responses right into the question box, and then as they come in, Yulia, I can just read them off.
Wonderful, thank you. And so what I'm thinking is we'll talk about our next slide, and then we'll take a break. We'll have Greg read off some of the responses. So take a few moments right now to put something into the chat box there. And so I'm going to be introducing now Benny, who's going to talk about motivation. I think this is a big one, especially when starting something new and might be uncertain or scary. So we'll have Benny share about motivation.
Great, thank you very much. And thanks to Pam for starting us off with planning in the roadmap section of professionally developing yourself. So as you are identifying and making that plan for yourself, your career plan, it's important to find something that you enjoy doing and the motivation for that. It's not necessarily a marathon. It's a marathon and not a race. So it's okay if you're not really sure or exactly doing what you are wanting to do. And if you are currently in a job position, start to take some stock of what you are doing that you like and you dislike. I suggest grabbing your job description and crossing out things that you dislike doing, and star the ones that you like doing. In doing this exercise, you're identifying things that either in your next role at your current workplace or the next job you may be going into, you'll be able to identify, okay, well, these are the things I don't really want to do, so this might not be a great fit for me, but there are some other things here that I really are energized about. And so you can really start crafting your job description to be what you like to do and enjoy doing. Additionally, I would also say finding some people in your circle or community who encourage you and also who you also encourage. It's one of those things where you latch onto those that are supportive and encouraging, especially in a time where you're trying to figure yourself out or figuring out the next step. It can be a little scary, and having people in your corner that aren't necessarily supporting you can be a very difficult thing. So for example, I'm interested in finance right now, and let's say my friends were to say, well, ew, gross, that's a silly field to be in, right? That can be very discouraging in my personal development. And some may say I should find new, better friends. Well, that may not be the best case scenario, right? And that may be true, that you might need to find a community that is supportive and that's important in your development to being able to take that leap. And likewise, on the other hand, is also encouraging others. They may be in the same spot as you, trying to understand and figure out what the next step may be. And so encouraging their development as well is important to support as well.
Yeah, I love that, Benny, and I think a sense of community can definitely go a long way, especially on when we're embarking on a new journey. So Benny, I'd love for you to share about skill building, especially as it ties to finding things that one enjoys and building up those things.
Sure. So Like what Pam had said earlier about understanding yourself and identifying your strengths and value to the marketplace, you also want to build your brand and allowing people to know what you're great at doing. And so as you continue your career, you can use your strengths and values to springboard into different departments or different roles. So for example, one of my personal strengths is analysis, and I'm currently working in a role that does pricing and sales analysis to inform business decisions. And it's a skill that I hope to leverage either in my next role at this company or next job in a different company. And in thinking about your next move, either in the same company or elsewhere, it's also a good idea to continue building your skills with continuing education. While this isn't necessarily a plug for OSU per se, but the traditional higher education institutions do have plenty of formal and one-time programs to continue learning about certain subjects. So not only that, but multiple professional organizations do host lunch and learns and events where they bring speakers to talk about hot topics in a specific industry. So whether it is formal education that you're seeking or attending workshops in your community, there are plenty of opportunities to build your skills with continuing education. And actually, some industries or professions may even require you to log a certain number of continuing education credits so that they know you're still engaged in learning. So for example, the finance industry or healthcare or accounting, they all have certain regulations and needs for continuing education. So specifically for accounting, with all of the different tax rules and tax laws changing every year or every couple of years, those in that field really need to understand the latest and greatest knowledge.
Thank you, Benny. So we're also gonna go over personal branding, and I think few things will move you more forward than a strong, very mindfully created personal brand. And we do have several webinars on this topic. This is just a brief intro, and so we'll have Benny talk more about that as well.
Absolutely. So in creating a personal brand, there's building a strong personal brand is important, and whether or not it's online or in person, this is your reputation. Similarly to personal friendships where people know you as the penny pincher or the one who has a good time or drives to see friends every weekend that live 200 or 300 miles away, you know, you also have a personal brand that needs to be cultivated throughout your career. So the end goal is where you want to be known as a master of a certain business unit per se. So for example here, Mark is known as, could be known as the finance guru on this panel due to his extensive career in accounting and finance, and Pam as well in education and in law. So those are specific business units or areas of expertise that you can be known as, or you can also be known for the solutions that you provide. So for example, some certain people could be known for their career in turning around a mismanaged company, being the person to call if your company is in a rough spot and you really need them to help identify and set a goal to help the company get out of that situation. So being known for either the thing that you do best or the process in which that you do best is really great. And so being able to create a cohesive value and mission statement is great because you can use that as an elevator pitch during networking events, or just as you're meeting people in the community. You can really tell them not only, hi, my name is Benny and I work in the computer industry as a marketer, but you can really tell them succinctly about what you bring as a value and what your mission is in bringing value to a company. And so with things that I would suggest you take a look at are what words that really describe you in creating your mission statement and your values. Are you a big picture thinker, or are you detail oriented? Are you a creative, or are you more straightforward thinker, process oriented? And so thinking about those words or attributes that describe you. And this exercise you could do yourself, or you could even ask some colleagues around you, it's interesting to hear that there may be a disconnect, or you may know yourself as one thing, but some of your colleagues may actually identify you as something else. So maybe instead of being the analytical person that I think that I am, maybe outwardly exhibiting, my colleagues may call me as the numbers person, or the person that really understands logistics or things like that. And lastly, a values alignment. It's also about understanding what values you have in your personal life and in your community. What are the things that make you, you? And unfortunately, that's not something that really we can touch on in the short amount of time, but really just understanding more about what do I hold most dear to me in my life. So for example, my wife, she holds friendship and family as things that are very close to her, and that's her personal brand. And so anything that she does, she has a goal, end goal in mind of pointing toward those communities. And so that's a quick lesson on how to build your personal brand and how to get those individual words or phrases that help build a cohesive identity for you in your community.
That's fantastic, Benny. Thank you. And I am available to coach people on personal branding. So do contact me if this is an area where you feel like you could do a little bit more work. What I find from having worked with many hundreds of people on this topic is most make it too complicated. And I can help you break it into small, simple, doable steps that maximize your time and efforts. I think there's no telling where your career can go with just focusing on a little bit of effort towards personal branding. I'm going to actually turn it over to Greg now and see about questions from the audience. What's coming up for people? What can Benny address at this time?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start with the question that we threw out. So the question was, what do you think is the most important part of a professional development plan? I'll just read some of the answers here. So knowing yourself and your values, setting goals, working on opportunities, being honest with yourself, and checking in and regrouping if necessary. And then, let me throw out some of the questions that we do have. And I think this one is one of my favorite questions. And I think it's so relevant because I think we all ask this question. But before I ask it, I'm wondering if it's the right question to ask. So the question is, what is the best way to be noticed amongst thousands of applicants? So is that the right question that we should be asking? So I'll throw it out to the panel.
Sure, I'll speak on that first. So that might not necessarily be the right question to ask, but as you were saying, John, but I think in general, right, the question is, how do I get through this online application thing? Because, you know, we're sitting here and talking about finding jobs. And in reality, the online system is something that really is discouraging. And so I would actually encourage people to network and talk to people in their community and really identify, what do I really want to do? Now, if it's a job description that you really think that you're a great fit for, find somebody that works for that company that you are already connected with. And OSU is a great way to connect with on that. Yulia and other folks at the Alumni Association could connect you with people at that company. And LinkedIn is a great way to identify specific people. But the online portal, I would say, is not necessarily the greatest way anymore to apply for jobs. Some people may call it a black hole. You send your resume in and you never hear back until it's too late. So being proactive and using other avenues in your community as a way to make yourself available and visible to the employer is the best way, is personal connections.
That's great. Thank you, Benny. And we're actually, I personally think, yeah, that question is a deep one. And I think a lot of what Mark's going to share later on the presentation is going to really hit home for this. So we're going to move on for now, but we're definitely going to revisit that question, and that's a really great one to focus on. So we're going to have Benny share about mentorship next.
Okay. And lastly, mentorship. So I saw some questions about mentorship earlier, and I view mentorship as something vital to your development as a professional. And so a couple things here is finding people that do what you want to do and seeking those out. So using LinkedIn as a great way to identify either the responsibilities or things that they're doing that you want to do, and connect with them. Reach out to them. For those that are students on the webinar today, using that title is a really great way to open some doors for you. Another way is to connect with the Alumni Association or other folks to use your community. And being able to talk with them and doing informational interviews and asking, how did you get there? And what are some ways in my current position you might move, or what kind of jobs would you do? And that's the important part of sounding boards as well. Mentors are a great way to help you understand, okay, is this something that I should be doing, or is there something else on the horizon that this mentor is seeing in the marketplace here? And so using them as a way to kind of get at what you're trying to think is really great. And they can act as an effective tool in your development, because you can work out how to approach the topic of, I want to move into certain other subjects in the professional setting. So a way to talk to your boss about that as well, potentially. And then lastly, finding a variety of mentors as well. One of my mentors had actually said, okay, well, you've been talking to me for a little bit. Do you have any other mentors? And I said, no. And he said, okay, well, we're not going to talk until you let me know you've found one or two more. And the reason for that, it's important because you want to find someone whose job you want, whose job you currently have, or the subject area, and find a mentor who's completely different from you in many aspects. And the reason for that is they provide a variety of viewpoints. So to sum that up, is mentorship is a great way of finding out different viewpoints and different ideas, and in reaching out, you'll be able to identify some of those things that you might not otherwise know. Everyone in the community has gone through similar trials and similar challenges, and many of us are more than willing to speak about ourselves and how we got to where we are. And so being able to do that is really great.
That's awesome. That's like the ultimate mentor, the mentor who encouraged you to get more mentors. I love it. Greg's going to introduce our next poll question here for us.
Okay, and the question is, let me launch it here. What area do you think is strongest for you? So if you want to select one of the following: personal branding, a professional plan, networking or meeting more people, mentorship in relationships, or other. So I'll keep that open for now as the responses come in. It's across the board, but it looks like networking or meeting more people is the winner for now.
That's awesome. And is it still the same, Greg, as the questions are, the responses are coming in?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's great. So that actually leads us perfectly into the next section, which is going to be with Mark, and it's going to be all about connecting with others. So Mark, take it away.
Thank you, Yulia. Sort of the most important point here from my point of view is prioritizing networking and meeting new people. In my over 35 year career, I had a couple of periods of time where I was either looking or in between jobs, where I did contract work and did networking sort of full time and really focused on it as a full-time job. now in my semi-retirement. I'm also networking for part-time work, so it is something that's ongoing. Early on, I had a good mentor on networking, and I was in the process of leaving a technology startup, and there was a CFO day back then with the American Electronics Association, but it was like $250, and the company I was leaving wasn't going to pay for it. And I was talking to my mentor. I said, "Yeah, I don't think I'm going to go. I think $250 is too much." He goes, "All right, Mark, let's think about this. So what you're talking about here is you think this is probably one of the best networking events that you could go to, probably the best. Yeah, yeah. And this is about your career and the next 20 years. Yeah, yeah. You really think $250 is too much? And it's a matter of focusing on it as how important it is." So anyway, I went, and it was a good investment. One of the other things you need to do is to budget your time to devote a certain amount of hours per week. And, more so if you are full-time networking, but even when you have a job and you want to keep up your network, you need to continue to put some time in your schedule, including travel, because you may need to travel to a different location. Like when I was in Corvallis, travel to Portland, or from here, there's a lot of things that happen in Seattle. So budget that into your time.
That's really great. Thank you. And then we'll look at more ways of how to connect and go into more details on that.
Yeah. So use all your resources for contacts. You'd be surprised, whether it's family, friends, people from church or other non-business things, friends of your parents if you're a student. You can find a lot of good contacts, and really you may be looking for a job or you may be looking for a mentor, but really you're just looking for somebody who will give you 20 minutes and you can sit down with and talk to them about it. Benny mentioned continuing education, being a CPA and a finance person. I've had a lot of good networking success going to continuing education meetings. So there's a lot of people there. Sometimes it's people who you might be competing with for a particular job, but also there's some good knowledge base there and a good place to look for a mentor. When I sit down with someone, first of all, I'd like to do it in person if I can. If they only have time for phone, that's fine. But if I can, I'd like to sit down with them, not more than 20 minutes. Okay, I don't want to take too much of their time. Talk to them a little bit, listen mostly, ask them their story. Let them tell you that. Let them tell you if they have more time. And before you're done, ask them, if you were me and you were networking or job searching or whatever you're doing at the time, who would you talk to? And I don't know that I've ever left a networking meeting without one or two ideas for people to talk to that I didn't know before. And you talk to them and it just, it expands that way. The other thing, in addition to like continuing education, go to as many industry events as possible. And again, that's a great place to meet people that maybe not in your role, but are in your industry, and also non-business. Some of the work I've gotten as a contract CPA has been through like the YMCA board that I was on, or some of the other organizations.
That's great, Mark. Greg, let's do a couple audience questions.
Okay, you got it. So we had talked about SWOT analysis and recognizing skills and strengths. So my question for you, how do you call those out in a professional way to catch the attention of recruiters? So once you know your skills and what you're good at, how do you actually let other folks know about that?
Is it for any of us to answer?
Yes, Pam, if you want to go first, and then
Uh,
the rest of the panelists as you will.
Right. I think you set yourself apart in a number of different ways. It depends on whether you're meeting with someone in person or if it's online or other kinds of communication. You set the way to talk to people about your skills is just to say, these are the skills that I have. Or if you're responding to something about a particular position, look at the position description to try and figure out what might be the things that they're looking for and how do your own strengths line up with that. I think those are, the best ways. If either it's in a cover letter or you're talking to someone one-to-one, or you're again, LinkedIn, if you have a certain kind of skills that you're trying to get people to notice and to post things about that, be sure you include it in your resumes and your descriptions. Those are the best ways I can think of to let people know what your skills are.
Thank you, Pam. And it looks like Benny might need to leave early. So Benny, if you have any closing thoughts you'd want to address, go ahead and do that now. And we're really grateful for your time and you being willing to be here at this webinar.
Absolutely. Yeah, my apologies for needing to leave early, but I wanted to say that I actually found this current job that I have through OSU. So networking and taking time to build your professional self in meeting new people in the industry and being your authentic self is very important. And building your skills, your personal brand, being a mentor, and finding mentors. And lastly, it's a lifelong discussion. So there's no rush to figure it out right away. Some of the most interesting people are those that take some time to discover the skill sets that they have and have to offer.
That's great. Benny, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And so now we'll have Mark address that same question.
I think it's pretty well covered. I'm ready to go to the next slide.
Wonderful. Okay, so next slide is a good one, which is keeping track of it all. So you make all these contacts, and how do you keep track of them?
Thank you, Yulia. So keeping track is important because it will get overwhelming pretty quickly. I used an Excel spreadsheet. Being the sort of finance guy, that was easiest for me, but there are certainly other ways to do it. But do keep track. And while you're doing network, particularly if you are in job search mode, follow up at least monthly with your contacts. I would tell people who come in and talk to me, here's your resume sitting on top of my pile. I'll notice it for the next couple of days, but if something doesn't come across my desk or through my email that I think of you, in a couple of weeks, it won't be all that valuable. So follow up at least monthly. And I used to, when I was doing, I'd send an email, and you could send something that's, like, here's my updated resume. Just wanted to make sure you had it. I'm still looking. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me. It's really touching base. And, or I used to call it like tagging. A lot of times if I'd go to an industry event, I'd see some of the people that I had networked with, and I would just, say hi to them, kind of give them a 2-second, still looking, let me know. And then I'd be like, all right, tag. And I'd, record that on my spreadsheet so I could keep track. Because as you do this, you'll get up and you'll get a significant amount. My first round on this, I was over 100 names on my spreadsheet by the time that that I actually found a new job and had, and then tried to keep up with them. The next thing, of course, is use LinkedIn. I know I'm the fourth person on this webinar to mention LinkedIn, but it is a great tool for communicating, also for leads and for researching people. If you're going to have a meeting with a new contact and you don't know their story that well, go on LinkedIn, find in a little bit about them, find out what their background is, still ask them their story and listen, but at least you'll sort of be prepared for it. The other thing is to have business cards made. I know it sounds sort of old school, but same mentor that I mentioned earlier, we had a financial discussion about business cards, and I'm like, well, I kind of have the ones from my current employer. I'm just going to use those. He's like, really? Okay. And do you know how much it costs for business cards? Well, it's like, $10 for 100, but I probably won't use that many of them, whatever. And, he's like, okay, go spend the $10, get a business card made that's specific to you, not as part of your current company, that has your personal stuff on it, so you don't have to be scribbling on your company card, and it just looks better. The other advice he gave me is get a little business card holder, a little leather, vinyl, whatever, so that when you're having a discussion at an event, you can pull out your business card holder, start to pull out your card. You don't even have to ask them for their business card, they'll give it to you. Of course, you also want to have a V card, which you can send as well. So my last point on this, I mentioned it's kind of where I started, is prioritizing networking, whether you're in job search mode or not. So my story on that is I was meeting with the CFO, who later became the CEO of a large company, who I'd worked with at Price Waterhouse, but I hadn't talked to in a couple of years. I sat down with him, and he was polite but sort of direct about, oh yeah, Mark, hey, it's good to see you. Yeah, it's been a couple of years, and really haven't seen you around. We haven't called me. And oh, look, now you're looking for a job, and here you are asking me, for a job or for contacts. Don't be that guy. Don't be that person. Keep up your network as you go along. Go to OSU events, industry events, whatever it takes to keep up on that.
That's awesome. I love that. Mark, thank you so much for sharing all of that. That's really, really good advice. We're actually going to skip the next poll question for the sake of time, and we're going to turn it over to Pam to talk a little bit more about networking at an event.
Great. I'm glad we have time for this, because I think it's one of the most important topics. And I've spoken about networking at events at a number of different organizations, and I always get the question about I hate going to events because I don't know anybody, or I don't know what to do, or that I think that if you just keep in your head that everybody is there to network, you're not the only one. Everybody wants to meet new people. Everybody wants to find different ways to increase their professional development. And networking at an event, I think, is one of the best. But you don't have to be nervous about going to them, even if you have to go alone, if you just do a little bit of prep ahead of time. Mark talked about this just a little bit, but where I always start out when I'm going to an event is I learn about the event and who the speaker is, because there's usually a speaker at these events. And I do that research that Mark talked about both the speaker and about the organization that's putting on the event, and about some of the companies that are sponsoring the event, because people from those companies will be at the meeting or at the event. I'm able to, by doing all that, I'm able to start a conversation with someone about the event or about who's speaking, or it just gives you information topics when you're trying to meet people. I think you have to be really focused when you go to an event about why you're there and who you want to meet. So if you've done your research in advance about the event and who's putting it on and the companies that are going to be there, you're going to have some ideas about the kinds of people that you want to meet when you're there, and you got to stay focused on that. I think it's important to have some kind of an elevator pitch about yourself, because someone's going to say, oh, Pam, nice to meet you. Tell me what you do. And bingo, then you have to start talking about yourself and the kinds of things that you do professionally to them. And then you want to be sure that you're asking about that you're not monopolizing the conversation, and that you're giving the other person a chance to tell you about them as well. And then you want to make sure that you limit your time you're talking to each person. Don't monopolize one person, and don't become monopolized yourself, An easy way is just to say, oh, it's been wonderful talking to you. I don't want to monopolize your time, and I hope to get in touch with you again soon. Again, of course, as Mark was talking about, the exchange of cards, that's also a great way to end a conversation by just pulling out your card and saying, I'd like to speak to you more. Let's get together for coffee, or I'd like to talk to you again. That's a very easy way to move on to yet another person. Have your card ready. Ask for meetings, or say, I'm going to call you, just like Mark said. And then be sure that you follow up afterward. That if you tell someone you're going to call them or you want to meet with them again, make sure that you follow up on that. And then that goes back to Mark's discussion about being organized. Make sure that you're noting this new person, you're putting them in your contacts, and that you're ready to go and talk to them some more. And that should make networking a lot simpler.
That's great, Pam. I love it. And then, Pam, could you share a few tips on building your network with involvement?
Sure. I think we've gone over quite a bit of this already, but just to re-emphasize it, one of the most important things about professional development and networking is just being out there, being involved, being known as a person who likes to be involved or likes to lead. So some of the ways that you can do that is to join a board. Some organizations have also, for the younger people, have junior boards that you can join and move on up into to the other boards. I have found board service to be a really wonderful way to meet people. I know Mark mentioned it in his remarks as well. I met a lot of very interesting people. I have, in a couple of situations, gotten jobs, changed jobs because of the people that I met when I was on a board. Another way is to, I've mentioned this before, write an article or be a speaker at an event. If you want to improve your speaking skills, practice makes perfect. There are also Toastmaster organizations in most towns to help you with your speaking abilities. Again, posting work-related articles or thoughts on social media, and what can I say, LinkedIn, right? Keep it professional when you're on LinkedIn. I think that's really important. And be sure you have the opportunity to use LinkedIn in all the different ways that you can. You not only can look people up, but you can learn about companies, and you can find about what kinds of things the people you might be meeting are interested in. And be sure that you keep your own profile up to date on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Pam.
That's it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's really great advice. So because we only have a few minutes, we're going to push through the rest of the slides here. We're going to skip the poll question. I'm going to do a quick summary, again, just for the sake of time here. I think the presenters did a wonderful job discussing these points, so assessing where you are and creating a plan, looking at really meeting new people, and then connecting. I think that's the key takeaway that I got from the presenters. I want to outline some next steps for us. So do join our LinkedIn groups. We have one called OSU Be Recruited. We have over 6,000 members on there. And then we also have the International OSU Alumni Student and Faculty Staff LinkedIn. So go ahead and do that. And if you wish to be entered to win a free career consultation, go ahead and message me one takeaway from the webinar, and I'd be glad to enter you into winning that. And then if you have follow-up questions, contact me. I'm always happy and eager to help everyone. And then I'm going to turn it over to Greg to do any last announcements and etc.
Thank you so much, Julia, Mark, Pam, and Benny. That was great. And I talked a little bit about professional and continuing education here at OSU. And the reason we like to partner with the Alumni Association and hear from our alumni, because we're often able to connect with the very widespread OSU network throughout not only the state of Oregon, but the US and beyond. And each program we offer is designed for working professionals with convenient online classes and year-round start dates. And again, I would like to thank Julia, Mark, Pam, and Benny. We appreciate having you here, and this was great, and you delivered a ton of great content. And with that, I will wrap it up. So thank you so much, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mark, Pam, and Benny.
Thank you.
Thank you all.